So I'm going to be sharing with you another great story from this anthology from Literary Amazonia, Modern Writing by Amazonian Authors. And it's a short story that I really, really love, of course. And it's by Max Carphenteir, and it's translated by R. Kelly Washburn, and it's titled The Suicide of a Blue Ant. It's a little long, but it's really worth it. And here it goes. For an hour she had waited for the ending she wanted. She had climbed to the rose that hung over the river and lay herself down on the fringe of a petal, like one who balances on the brink of an abyss. When she got there, 10 petals had already fallen on the waters, at the rate of a dying rose. Then 4 more fell, and they all could not sustain their lightness on the churning skin of the water, which would carry them, waterlogged, to their depths. This would be her way of dying. When the petal she was clinging to fell, she would have, voluntarily and rosily, put an end to her destiny as a blue ant. She would die in a flash like a rose that is lost in the void. There were but 3 petals to go, hers and 2 more. Hers would be the first to fall, the second, the third. Each stronger breeze that blew in the suicidal morning, shaking the branches, scattering aromas, could bring a subtle touch of death. A breeze could be a puff of death blowing over life. Maybe. The blue ant knew that and saw it, and she wanted it. But she could not hold the breeze accountable, since falling is inherent to petals, inevitable, and the decision was hers. She had been born blue, and more than that, she felt blue. Blue was her affliction. She had come into this world one summer morning, much like that one, and the entire colony at the foot of the fig tree cowered in fright at her extraordinary color. Her first impression of the world was one of fright. Fright in her mother's eyes, in the eyes of her fellow ants, workers and chiefs of the ant hill, ants who are born lucid. She remembers that after the brief, awestruck comments all around, the commander arrived, looked at her strangely, complained of the long work stoppage, and, in authoritarian tones, showed her the ropes. She was to begin work immediately in the bowl contingent, making up the second rank of those who go out in search of food. Ants have no childhood, she thought, and I am one of them, with the difference that I have the notion and the need for childhood, plus the heaven-sent stigma on my skin. She worked the whole summer through. Work, eat, store. The conventional expenditures of a community that only looked to the interests of productivity and the stomach. Solitude like an island surrounded by eyes on all sides. Work, eat, store. No one cared about her need to stop and look at the clouds, to comment on the greenness of the grass they trod daily, to unravel the mystery of the sinking forest. She wanted to always have time to feel things deeply. She would like to make the others aware of the secretly beautiful moments that arose in their work, and that went unnoticed, like the one in which her fellow ants, carrying across a beam of light on the leaf, besides not noticing the encompassing light, unswerving with impunity, desiccated the dew that contained it. Much was seen, little felt. All looked at each other, none deeply finding each other. She was a blue ant like a word shortage, a misfit in the universe where she had been born. Another petal fell. The one to her right hung a second in space and disappeared in the abyss of the stream. Will mine be the next one? Or the last? Stoically she eyed the maelstrom, and her determination enfolded her with the serenity of the great martyrs. The hour of death's closing in transforms living things and reveals the truth of their nature, which takes its leave in its own time. She had fulfilled her destiny and was confronting her own plenitude without regret. She would never, of her own will, deny her nature, true in deed and feeling. She had loved the colors of all the seasons, the cold weighing down the leaves and the sun hanging on the fruits, the restlessness of the lizard, the precision of all things, the silent palpitation of the void, and the clear word of absences. Many were the times she had descended to the deepest gallery of the anthill to hear the movement of the rocks and transformation. Long had she lived with the crumbled light of the pollen and enjoyed being the fertilizing vehicle of the flowers of the valley. Pieces of fruit or wings from dead little birds. Her burdens were always living burdens, for she knew the sacrifices of the defeated jungle and the fallen architecture of a flight. Her torment was to feel different in the flesh and in her essence, in her way of fulfilling herself. The source of her joy and stability in the world were not identical to those of her surrounding companions. She felt alienated, the only one of her kind, a vast mystery burning in a blue form. Her full self-realization set her apart from the others, rendering her strange and undesirable in a community focused entirely on material survival. The feeling of solitude is the affirmation of inner being triumphing over appearances. She had suffered much in seeking to measure up to her sisters, to try to feel as they felt, to seek as they sought, by assuming a deliberate blindness to the horizons. In the anthills, superfluity prevails and nothing is seen. The effort to adapt in this way had done violence to her sense of self, and life had become meaningless and suffering. She had preferred death to continuing to feel achingly unique, penned in on all sides by fear and censure. The next to last petal dropped, making the one she was on quiver, weakening even more her tenuous suspension on the stalk. The midday sun, punishing the deep red velvet, lit up the minuscule overhanging parts of the final leaf, surrounding the ant with dozens of disconsolate pseudo flowers. The day's full force was crackling the last rose petal. It would not be long now. The blueness of her body surrounded by radiance embodied by the spirit of the valley, and all of the voices of the clearing sang in her breast. It was her final joy. She had discovered that the bush was singing that way because it harbored a nest in its branches, just as she now heard voices right in her heart. The wind blew, tearing the branches from the nearest Othecia tree, and swept the last petal from the branch. The ant closed her eyes and felt the vertigo of the fall. The wind, though, denied it the cold plunge into the waters, for the petal poised on the abyss, conquering the chasm, then hovered over the river bank and was flown farther and farther adrift. It rose higher than bushes, rapidly gained the highest treetops, and reaching the mountain peaks, continued rising leisurely until vanishing from sight in the heart of the low-lying blue cloud. She had not fallen in the waters. Our Anne had returned to the heavens. And even today, few in the valley believe that she died in the heart of a blue cloud, blue like the Anne herself, stifled in clarity and descent.